When you're on the clock looking for that late round sleeper, who do you take? You take maybe some rookies. You take some guys that are proving it. Take guys that are in contract here. Well, at the FFU, we're here to discuss the 4 late round sleepers that you should be targeting each draft this season. So stay tuned as we chat about them. And welcome in, folks. It's myself and Jeremy today on the FFU channel. We're talking about the sleepers. How you doing, Jeremy?
I'm good, but Jesse, we need to get the energy up in the building. Let's go. We're talking about 4 late round sleepers. Come on, let's get it done. Because it's June 8th. It's June 8th. So why not talk about sleepers in the redraft when it'll change change in 2 months anyway? But who cares? Let's do it. Let's have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, Scott Fishbowl got us hyped. We're ready for a redraft, even though we know like shit's gonna change. So if you're drafting right now, just expect chaos by the time the season rolls around, especially in December.
Very true.
You're looking at your roster like, who was this guy? I wasn't even drafting him. It's like that's just how it goes. But yeah, I'm excited. Like we're slowly getting into all of it. We're creeping along. We're getting there. So which position you want to hit on first? You want to go quarterback, wide receiver, running back, or tight end? We can kind of go.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about my quarterback so much because these are late round guys, right? So we had to kind of hunt for value as opposed to kind of hunting for the guys that we absolutely love. But a guy that I absolutely love, Jesse, that you took at running back is, I think, who we should start with. Let's kick this show off with a bang. At running back, Jesse takes Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. Absolutely phenomenal. And while Jesse gives a little bit of attention to his daughter for just a second, let's run into Tyjae Spears and talk a little bit about what he did last season. 100 rushing attempts, 453 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but 70 targets for 52 receptions, 385 yards, and an additional touchdown. Obviously, Tyjae is being used in the receiving game a ton. We don't expect that to change, although Tony Pollard coming in, we know he has those chops as well. So that's something to consider as maybe that's scaled back. But the hope, of course, is that Brian Callahan coming over as head coach, coming over from Cincinnati, that he's going to be able to institute and implement an offense here that's going to get the best out of Will Levis, get the best out of these running backs and really the whole offense. And the thing that I love about Tennessee, and we're going to talk about this all episode because we got another Titans player we're going to talk about next. But the thing that I love about Tennessee is not only is their offense much improved, their defense is probably bottom 5 in the league, like locked in. There's just a ton of turnover here. So, Mike Vrabel is gone, the big defensive presence. We're moving more to an offensive-minded scheme and system and coaches, and this defense is not looking good. So we love that for fantasy for our offensive players. So, Jesse, Tyjae Spears, he did it in a nice small sample last year. What are we expecting here with a full 17 games of at about 50% usage out of the backfield?
Yeah, like last year, he was one of the more efficient running backs in the league, playing alongside Derrick Henry. He carved out the biggest role any running back who's played along Derrick Henry since he's been in the league did that. And like he put up a 14% target share. He was top 5 in juke rate. He was top 5 in break rate run rate. Like even in one of the worst offensive situations, like the Titans had a terrible offensive line. The skill position players were all over the place. It was a very bad offense. Like, and we saw Henry struggle. What worked well for Spears is he was able to succeed just because you get him in space. The guy's a monster. And I know he doesn't have ACLs, but it's like, dude, you don't need ACLs if you're that good of a player. Like we're just going to ride through it. And I know Aaron loves Zach Moss, case player right there. But what the issue with Zach Moss compared to Spears is, like, I know the workload we're getting with Spears compared to Moss. Moss is still a bit of a gamble. So, like, it's one we're not assured of. Like, maybe Chase Brown takes a big role. We don't know. I know Spears is going to play a big role. I know they brought in Pollard to play a role to play alongside him, right? Exactly. Pollard is older. He's the least efficient back. He's just worse across the board last year. So, usually running backs, once they kind of do that, they don't regress positively. Now, the Titans did improve the offensive line. They got J.C. Latham. He's going to boost them up significantly. Like, that's going to help out a lot there. And you just got to keep him upright. Like, keep Levis upright and then open the holes. And Spears showed that even with a bad offensive line, he's a good player and someone who is very viable for fantasy football. If the offensive line proves maybe top half, maybe 15 league, that's going to work well for these guys. So, like, I kind of like targeting the Titans offense just because it's discounted across the board. Realistically, like you can get the wide receiver one there in the mid like 80s with either Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins. You can get, the QB1, Will Levis, super late, who we'll talk about here in a second. Or you can get your RB1, whoever you prefer. I just don't know why Pollard goes above Spears. That's the biggest question mark I have because Spears was a better player across the board. So if I'm going to bet on a running back on that offense, I want the younger, more efficient back who was better in what he did last year. And like his role is designed for fantasy because he's a really good receiving back too. So at cost, like you're in the triple digits, pick like 103, like sign me up all day. Like I love that pick.
Yeah. I think it's a great call. And this is, look, unfortunately, I don't play a lot of best ball because Underdog doesn't facilitate best ball, gambling in the Netherlands. But that's another topic for another day. But a best ball bro will sit here and tell you that the Titans stack is probably one of the cheaper ones that you can target late on the slate, really as kind of a secondary or tertiary stack. And across the board, right? Chig is going super late. You can get Tyjae and or Pollard later than you probably should. Obviously, one or two of those wide receivers. We're not talking about world beaters here in terms of a 32, 3, 4-year-old. Anyway, an aging DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, who's a serviceable 2, stuck in a 3 role, and Calvin Ridley, who I'd love. But I'm not so sure in this offense, but I do believe in the talent. But overall, it's a good offense. You mentioned the offensive line upgrades. That's going to, only help. The big question mark and what we're all wondering is, does Will Levis have the chops to succeed as a starting NFL quarterback? And not just a starting NFL quarterback, not just can he hang on to the job, can he actually hope to facilitate and even possibly elevate some of these weapons here, like a Tyjae Spears, and help to get the most out of them. So we don't totally know what's going on here, but when you're talking about how late potentially you can get Tyjae Spears as the 1A or even high end 1B, 45 to 50% at worst, I think, of the snaps out of that backfield, you're really not paying a premium, right? What's he going for in ADP, Jesse?
When I'm looking at his average draft position, if we're talking about at PPR setup, but we can go half PPR if you want. He's going 110 in PPR, so that's RB 32. So you're taking him as basically a flex running back at cost, and I will stay up this, you can clip this, whatever. I guarantee you he's going to be better than RB 32 in points per game basis. Like he's going to smash that. Like he's too talented. And we look at their the projected win total. It's only 6.5 for the Titans. They're going to be in a lot of games where the offense like has to score to keep up because, like we talked about how bad the defense is. Who do you think is going to be playing when they're chasing it in 2-minute drills? It's going to be Pollard or is it going to be Spears? It's going to be Spears. Like he's going to have that role. So he's going to get basically the high value touches out of the backfield. The goal line's a little bit of an issue. We'll see if Pollard's more of that guy. But like you're getting targets, and I want the guy that's getting targets in that backfield because it's going to help out Will Levis. Like Will Levis needs that check down option besides those two guys. That's Tyjae Spears. And we saw like he's just absolutely a weapon in space. So like them finding ways to get him on the field more is like what I'm really excited about. And I know Pollard has the contract, but we did this last year with Miles Sanders, and I was like, stop drafting Miles Sanders. Like it's not a good fit. Like I do worry about Pollard in this offense. He was not good last year in Dallas, and this offense line is worse than Dallas. So, like, I'm curious to see how he fits. I would just much rather attack Spears and just pay for him because I expect him to be the better back.
Yeah, agree. And I think the one thing we can agree on is you mentioned JC Latham coming over, draft in the first round. Peter Skronsky is no slouch over there at that left guard. That whole left side is incredibly solid. And then, of course, Lloyd Cushenberry is one of the better centers in the league. So really, if you're just running off to the left side a ton, Brunskill and Petit Frere are okay. There's certainly good enough to hold this line and the cohesion together. But running off the left side, I think is going to be money for this team more often than not. You can run screens that direction. And once you get that running game working, opens up the play action passing game, opens up the draw game. You can screen and fake over to the other side. This is something that Callahan knows and will implement. It's just a matter of if Will Levis can succeed in the implementation. I think they're going to dumb it down so much that he can't do anything but succeed. So yeah, Tyjae Spears for me, I'm wheels up, and he's at least splitting that with Pollard, and probably going to take over the 1A duties by midseason.
Yeah, like I like that. I have him ranked 74th on the ADP, so I'm like 38 spots above on consensus, and I'm totally fine making the bet in that round because that's where I'm okay kind of taking a gamble on a player of his skill set and how talented he is. I don't care about the dynasty aspect of it. Like I want the guy this year. Like that's what I'm gonna do. So let's talk about the quarterback Will Levis. I think that's a good transition because that's your guy that we're betting on. So it's interesting we're betting on two Titans players. This might be a mistake from our aspect, but you know what? We're just gonna write it out. So why don't you tell us kind of the bull case on Will Levis and like why you're targeting him late?
Yeah, we're talking about late round targets. He's going 155th overall. I can't do the math right now, but it's super late. And he's the quarterback 24, right? So we're expecting him to be at the very end of back end QB2 value. But the question and the thing is that you're going to be able to get him with your last round pick in your redraft leagues. The question that you have to ask yourself is, does this person have high end upside? And I think with Will Levis, the answer is yes. We just don't know enough about him or this offense. There's a lot of unknown. And number two, are we going to know right away? And I think the answer is also yes, because in redraft, you want the ability to cut the cord as quick as possible, right? I love Will Levis and Bryce Young both as kind of these last round dart throws as your second quarterback in 1 QB redraft leagues, because you can just cut the cord after week 2. You can say, I've seen 2 weeks of these guys. It's not going to happen. Fine. But both of those guys, and let's switch to Will Levis here, but both of them they were built around this offseason. Improved offensive line, new coach, improved wide receiver and weapon situation across the board, right? Running back room and wide receiver. So for Will Levis, if he can get the ball downfield to Calvin Ridley, if he can find Tyler Boyd and Chig over the middle of the field, if DeAndre Hopkins has something left and is able to create enough separation where Levis can continue to get it to him like he did last year, and if these backs can, find some room in the running game to help open up the passing game, I think all of that is reasonable. I think Brian Callahan's the right guy for the job, and I think Will Levis is going to be able to be that Brock Purdy-esque facilitator. I'm not saying he's Brock Purdy. He's going to need to improve his accuracy. He's going to need to do a lot of other things. But Levis was a higher end draft pick who should be able to step into a role, work a system. And that's really what they're going to ask him to do in year one. I think if he does it, he has the potential to be a high end quarterback too. And if not, fall into kind of bottom end quarterback one value, because the one thing that we didn't talk about yet is that Will Levis can run, right? He's not a running quarterback, but he is athletic enough to get outside the pocket, to move around. He's young enough where he's willing to do it. And if he's going to add another 300, 350 rushing yards and a couple scores to that stat line, and then, end up with, I don't know, approaching 30 touchdowns, right? We could be talking about Will Levis as quarterback 14, 13, 12 when the season's said and done. Is that likely? No, but he's a guy who I want to take a shot on in case Will Levis kind of wasn't just a couple of flashes last season, and he's actually something that we need to, strongly consider in all formats.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out about Levis is his air yards per attempt last year were first in the NFL. It was over 10. Now, they're probably want that to come down a little bit because of the players they have. Ridley can play somewhat deep. Hopkins can go deep too, but theoretically, those are not their main weapons. So I'm curious. What I expect them to do is involve more play action in the offense. Like that, it seems like that's going to come over from Cincinnati, who ran a ton of play action certain times. I expect that to happen and running them in 11 personnel and all that fun stuff. So I think that's going to give Will Levis a little bit more time to set his feet, read, and then make the throws he needs to throw. And we all know he has a cannon. He's one of the strongest arms in the NFL. That's never the issue. It's about him reading defenses correctly and finding the right guys. And I think both of those guys, along with Spears out of the backfield, and you find players that kind of fit. So they talked about they want to use guys a certain way. We already heard the Jamar Chase reference, how they want to use him in this offense. So it's interesting from that aspect. But yeah, I'm fine taking the late round dart on Will Levis because they're setting that offense and giving him as many skill position players as possible to see if he's the guy or not. And like you said, you want to find out early. We're going to know partially way through the season, can Will Levis do it? Because it's going to be asked a lot of him because that defense, they have some good pieces, but they still got a ways to go to prove they're a quality NFL defense. They're just going to be a lot of high scoring games, with how that defense set up. So it's all right, Will Levis, show us what you got. So I'm excited to see with those options, how it looks. He could be a late round guy that you're targeting for sure. And I know we talked about before the show, Can we talk about Geno again? It's like, all right, we're gonna move off of Geno. We're gonna pick a different guy this time, like a true like last round pick. So this is how we got to Levis. But yeah, like it's a fine bet to make. I think he's a good player in a good position, and like it's basically let's prove it or lose it this year. So I'm excited to see him on that offense.
And we talked about the fact that the Tennessee Titans defense might be a little shaky, even if they're not. Here's their schedule: the Bears, much improved; the Jets, much improved; Green Bay, elite offense; Miami, elite offense. Thankfully, a bye week in week 5. Indy, elite offense, much improved; Buffalo, Detroit. All right, so the first 8 games are a murderer's row of at least, at league average 2 elite offenses. They're going to have to keep up. And, the only way that they're going to keep up here, look, they're built to pass the ball anyway. We know Pollard and Spears shouldn't be handling a large workload together. Sure, they could make one workhorse running back in terms of rush attempts, but, they're built to throw the football. So I think it all comes down to Will Levis. I don't know if I want Hopkins at cost or Ridley. I don't know if I want Pollard at cost, but I know I want the beneficiary of all of that production, and mostly it's going to be Will Levis.
Yeah, I think personally between the 2 wide receivers, like Ridley was just better across the board. Or not Ridley, sorry. Hopkins was still the guy that earned the high target share, was efficient. He was just in a bad situation last year. I'm expecting what Ridley does, he's going to open up a little bit more for him because DeAndre Hopkins did not have much help last year. Like we saw what they're doing with Treylon Burks. They're basically shunning him to special teams. So they were not happy with what they were doing last year. So I think between the 2 guys, I'm betting on Hopkins. Like he's just been the better player throughout his career. He was good last year. I'm expecting him to be good again this year. So, but if you want to go Ridley, like I get it. Ridley's still a good player. So they have good skill position players. They also have Chig Okonkwo, who's a yak specialist at tight end, which we didn't even hit on. Like he's a late round guy if you want to target him too. Like basically we're just saying the entire Titans offense is discounted because people saw what happened last year. They were in flux. They changed the position. But yeah, I like Will Levis at that cost. Like I think he's a good bet.
Yep. Awesome. How about you, Jesse? Who do you like at the wide receiver position? Who are you feeling as a late round flyer?
All right, so I'm talking like last pick of your draft because this is a guy I have ranked in the 140s who's going in the 180s. So I'm significantly above consensus along, and it's Jalen Polk. Now people were not expecting him to go second round. When I watched the tape on him, like I thought he was a good NFL player who could do things, particularly going downfield. So specifically, that's how he lines up. And you guess where he lines up? He goes second round to the Patriots, who have the most open wide receiver room in the NFL. Like they have Pop Douglas, who like I almost picked Pop Douglas, but I kind of wanted the upside of the rookie. Pop Douglas is a good slot wide receiver. Outside of that, it's just guys in flex. So you could make the case for anyone. So if you want to go Baker, you can go Baker. I don't think Baker's that good. I think Baker's a very capped player at the NFL level, but I know people have a hard on for Baker. So if you want to go him, sure. What I like about Polk is he wins at all 3 levels of the field. And if we look at his 2023 season and how he wins all over the field, 25% of his targets were deep, 36% of his targets were mid, 24 for sharp. So he was all over the field, used basically all over. Like Washington lined him up. They were like, you can win short, you can win intermediate, you can win deep. What that does for the Patriots is that allows him to do that with Drake May because we've already seen some of the tapes of like Drake May hitting him deep. I'm expecting that to play through. Now he's going to play the flanker role in the offense. He's not going to be the X. So I think it actually lines up easier. That's an easier position to win at than the X. So you're playing flanker, you're off the line of scrimmage, you're in motion doing those things. I think it works really well for him. And you're basically getting a shot at a Patriots wide receiver 1. I know it sounds gross, but folks, this is not the same Patriots team. They revamped the staff. They've revamped the team. They've brought in new players. Like it's just a different team. It's no longer Bill Belichick. We don't have to worry about that god-awful Mac Jones offense the last few years. We're finally moving it. They have a quality NFL quarterback with a very strong arm. And Drake May has some decision issues, but like when he takes over, which might not be week 1, it might be week 2, week 3, whenever that happens, like I expect the offense to look capable for the first time in a few years. I want the wide receiver 1 or the guy with the potential to be the wide receiver 1. And we see it over the course of years. If you look at J.J. Zacharias, he talks about this. Rookies at running back and wide receiver show so much more upside late. So instead of targeting Pop Douglas, because I like Pop Douglas, he can earn a lot of targets, I'm going to take a shot on Polk, who I think can be towards the end of the year, come on strong, and be a guy you're starting as like a wide receiver 2 or flex for you week in, week out towards the end of the season. So yeah, Jalen Polk at like he's at pick 180. I have him at pick 140. You can target him. That's super late in drafts. Like we're talking round 12 through round 14, round 15. Like you just throw the dart and you hit it. And it's particularly in best ball. Like I like that a lot. But in managed leagues, yeah, I'll take Polk.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. And you mentioned the starting NFL quarterback with a strong arm. You're right. They do have Jacoby Brissett behind center, who's going to be starting for this team for the foreseeable future. I think it's the right move as a Patriots fan. I would love to see Brissett in there for at least a quarter of the year, if not half of the year, get Drake May up to speed. I don't think that's going to affect Jalen Polk at all. In fact, I think that would probably be a good thing for him. Help bring him along maybe even a little bit faster for fantasy purposes. Look, we know that Pop is still on this team. We know Javon Baker was drafted in the 4th round. We know the Patriots have KJ Osborne and Juju Smith-Schuster returning. We know Kendrick Bourne is there and is the best blocker, of this entire group. So he's likely to see the field more. Yes. But you can't hate Ramondre Stevenson and not love Antonio Gibson and not give any love to anyone in this passing game. Do we really think it's going to be Hunter Henry as the number 1 target? No, that's not going to happen. We saw that not happen last year. This is where Pop Douglas came out of nowhere. And Jalen Polk now has the capital to say, hey, I'm the guy in this offense. I deserve to be the number 1. I am the most talented here. That remains to be seen, but I think it's the right shot. I mean, for Javon Baker to put up a good fantasy season, I think in year 1 is a long shot. I like him longer term. I think he can develop, but he's going to be more of a downfield threat or kind of the short screen game to get him, utilized in the offense properly. And he may not even see the field as much. Jalen Polk's capital lets you know that he's going to see the field right away. They're going to give him all the opportunity in the world. I think Juju is probably a cut. I think guys like Tyquan Thornton are probably a cut. And then you're looking at Kendrick Bourne, you're looking at Pop, and you're looking at Jalen Polk, and Baker will be worked in, and that's fine. But if Jacoby Brissett is back there, look, I think he's just going to be able to provide an accurate football. He's not going to be doing crazy things like taking a ton of sacks and scrambling around and looking to ad lib that much. I think Jalen Polk getting it fully ingrained and implemented into this offense properly with Jacoby Brissett is his best case scenario. And he absolutely could have a Pop Douglas type season. And this time next year, we could be talking about Jalen Polk as, a top easy top 40 wide receiver and maybe someone with room to grow into the, late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I think Scott has an interesting question with Ramondre. And with the new scheme and them, they targeted Antonio Gibson fairly early in the free agency process, so they liked what he brings. I don't see him being a bell cow on this offense. I think he's a good NFL back. With the issue with Gibson, that's been forever the biggest issue, is he's not sound player, so he drives coaches crazy. This is why he was slowly phased out in Washington. The coaches were like, no, we have Brian Robinson. We could trust him. He's going to do what we want. Gibson, he's just not fundamentally sound. He's a wide receiver that's still trying to run the running back position. He's clearly athletic. I think he could play a role in the passing game, because he's just more explosive player than Ramondre. But yeah, I do I'm not sure the upside would be on Ramondre. That's the biggest question I have. I think he's a fine guy. If you want to do him as your RB3, and because he's going so late, you can get him and take a shot on him. But personally, this is one of the backfields I kind of want to get the backup, or I want to get the handcuff in case you're unsure Ramondre. If you end up with a draft, I want to get Gibson late too, where I get both guys, because one of those guys is going to be viable in fantasy football. I expect it to be Ramondre, but the way I look at it is I think Gibson's going to carve out a decent role. He's getting older. He should be getting smarter. They like his fit with that scheme, and I think that's what allures to me because Gibson. And maybe I'm just pilled by Gibson once again for the 8th year in a row, and this is just how it goes with Gibson. But, yeah, I think there is a little bit of upside attached to Gibson, and, Ramondre is just the safer play. If you want to, do a late shot on Gibson, I'm fine with that. But I think, we've seen Ramondre, he kind of struggled last year, and the offensive scheme did not help him. He was hurt. They talked about also they didn't want to give him all of this work because he got injured the previous years. They're all right, we want to take some work off of him. So I don't think he's ever going to be a true bell cow in that offense. But I think he's a viable fantasy option. And with Brissett, we saw, and this kind of gets back to Polk, when he was a quarterback with McLaurin, McLaurin was actually viable. He could do good things for you. And then it was Sam Howell, and it's somehow he's thrown it 80 times, and McLaurin's not viable. That's a whole other thing. But you can see Brissett, even if he's starting, the offense will it's a floor play. And then you bring in our boy Drake May a little bit later. He's the ceiling case. So late in the season, he comes on strong. It'll be interesting to see if the defense is capable. I think their defense is a lot better than the Titans' defense and should keep them in closer games. That's the one thing about the Patriots' offense is I don't expect them to have to air it out because the defense is still good. They have a lot of players coming back. So I think they could be a competent NFL team this year. And with Ramondre, like it's a fine play. I just don't know if the upside's there. Are you kind of what's your kind of case with Ramondre? Are you in on Ramondre all the way, or are you kind of like a little bit more like worried about him?
I have the same agreement with you about Ramondre Stevenson and pretty much disagree with you about every other point you made about how he gets to this situation because number one, I don't think the defense is viable. I think we had a lot of pieces that were held together by Bill Belichick's scheme. I think he was, as we know, he was a supreme doctor of scheme during the week, and then at halftime would completely change his scheme, and everybody knows what's going on, and they totally, confuse the offense, and they keep them in games, right? And that's another way that Ramondre was getting some of his run. But last season, Stevenson was, the first 5 weeks he couldn't really eclipse much more than 3 yards per carry, which was terrible. Then he started to kind of get into the groove and then fell off again late because of injury. You saw the decline in his efficiency. I don't necessarily chalk that fully up to him. There were some injury issues involved as well. But at the same time, I mean, you think about the fact that, I think the defense is going to be much worse. It means that the quarterback is going to have to throw the ball a lot more. Ramondre is better in pass protection than Antonio Gibson. So that will help keep him on the field. But I don't know that keeps him in a pass catching role. I think he can catch enough passes, but I look at him as Ramondre, right? To me, this is as Najee. This is a Najee Harris, Jalen Warren backfield, but a significantly, a tier or two lower than that because the production just won't be there. I think it's going to be less efficiency like a Najee Harris, more volume like Najee, and he's going to have some work in the passing game, but then Antonio Gibson is going to receive those high value touches. And he's going to be someone who I think will pop off a few weeks for fantasy, but ultimately I don't want either of these guys, even though to answer Scott's question, yes, Ramondre will get plenty of run, but it's a total turnover there in New England. So I'm kind of out at cost on these guys.
Yeah. And he talks about Hunter Henry, and I don't with late round tight ends, I really don't want late round tight ends this year. I'm looking at the guys on ADP and I'm like, oh, this is rough. Like last year we had a lot of good options where it's like, all right, if you want to go the late round tight end, there's a lot of good promising rookies and stuff. Like Bowers goes significantly earlier, like because people are higher on it, even though the situation sucks. Outside of him, and then like Freiermuth, if you want to make the case for him, there are a couple of guys where you're like, yeah, they could be a background tight end one. Like Hunter Henry's another guy because he's always been a guy that runs routes. He's involved in the end zone. Theoretically, he can get there with touchdowns. Like he can give you 7 touchdowns. He can give you, 40 receptions, 500 yards. Like nobody tight end plays. Like that's going to be a 12 to 18 like points per game. Like tight end 12 to tight end 18, like in that range. Like I think he can very much be there. He's viable. He's just too boom bust. Like he's not a good enough player. He's dealt with injuries, not the player he was coming out. So he's kind of going to have weeks where he does good and then weeks where he disappears. So like I much prefer him in like the best ball if you're targeting like 3 or 4 tight ends. Like in redraft, like he just drives me crazy. Like I hate him on my rosters. Like if there's one player I'm like, dude, I just don't want. I can't do it with you. So there's a little bit of bias with that. I'm like, yeah, dude, but I get it. I have him on a couple dynasty rosters, and I'm like, well, all right, cool. This is fun. Let me tell you what. But yeah, interesting enough to your point on pass protection, Gibson was actually like dead even. Like this is something he's gotten better at. Like he was dead even with Ramondre last year. Like he's 71.9, Ramondre 72.8. Like for PFF, which is like they're better at pass protection grading than I am. Like I'm not gonna try to be like I'm better than them. So I think he can do it. It's interesting to see that it's a new scheme, a new situation, how that works for them. So this is a backfield I want to pay attention to early in the season because it's going to give them some kind of clarity in how they view the position. Interestingly enough, I don't know if Ramondre's dealing with injury or what, but PFF has Gibson as the starter right now. So I don't know what's going on with that. That just could be them just putting something wrong, but that's to keep in mind. I just don't think Ramondre is 100% certain to be the guy throughout the entire season. Like that's just my worry with them. And we'll see. Like when teams completely change, the connection to those players and the coaching staff, like it moves on, right? So now that Ramondre is no longer with Bill Belichick, it's a whole new offense, a whole new like play caller. If that guy likes Gibson, which entirely he could, Gibson could see a significantly big role. That's just my worry whenever a team switches running backs because the biggest important for running backs is playing time, and I'm just not 100% sold with him. So yeah, I have some question marks about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to your point on Hunter Henry, he could have about 500 yards, about 7 touchdowns this season and be a viable tight end 12 to 18. Last season, he had 419 yards and 6 touchdowns, 42 receptions, only in 14 games. But he was a tight end 18, right? Like, I don't want to worry about drafting the tight end 18. I don't care. If he's the tight end 14 or 13, would I be surprised? No. Do I care? No. I mean, Hunter Henry is unlikely, in my opinion, to be the number one target on this team. Even if he is, I mean, we're not talking about a lot of high value targets, and we're certainly not talking about a lot of targets that are going to lead to a lot of fantasy production. So I'm completely out on Hunter Henry. I like the Jalen Polk, dart throw. But aside from that, do I want to pay Ramondre's price in the 7th, 8th round? No. Do I want to pay Gibson's price in the 10th round, 9th round? No. So wherever these guys are going, it's just going to be too much for me. Hunter Henry, no, thank you. I'm completely out on Patriots players as usual, sadly, for fantasy football. I just don't want anything to do with it. We'll see. Maybe I'll get somebody on waivers, but unlikely.
Yeah, like I much prefer paying for the wide receivers, and my two favorite targets are the late round wide receivers, Pop Douglas and Jalen Polk. Those are the two guys in the offense I want. If you want to throw a dart on Drake May super late, because the assumption he's not going to start right away, he's basically free in drafts. So if you want to take him as your upside shot, because he is very athletic, and like we saw how they used him in Carolina, he runs a lot, so like he can give you some of that theoretical upside late. I don't think you really need to draft him. You can kind of wait and pick him up on waivers. But if he's a guy you're targeting and you expect him to play earlier, you could throw the dart on and your 16th round pick, you could pick him up and just be like, you know what? We'll see how it works. But yeah, like with Brissett, it's gonna be interesting. So those two guys are the two guys I want personally.
Yeah.
With that, do you want, so we're talking about mid-level back end tight ends for tight end one. Do you want to switch to your favorite tight end and let the people know who you're targeting?
My favorite late round tight end, we had to pick somebody. It's Tyler Conklin of the New York Jets. Why? I don't know, but it's simply because of Aaron Rodgers. Something interesting about Tyler Conklin, since he has been a Jet and even the year before in Minnesota, when he's been getting a majority of the tight end run, 3 seasons running, this is like the Alvin Kamara effect. He's had 87, 87, and 87 targets for 61, 58, and 61 receptions, just hovering around 600 yards a season and 3 touchdowns each year, except for last year where he got 0 because he was a New York Jet. And it was just an absolute shit show there once Rodgers went down. Worst possible scenario of any sort of the amount of hype that was coming out of New York. Everything that Aaron Rodgers was saying and doing correctly. Robert Saleh was glowing. This whole team had a swagger about them. Did they have Hard Knocks? I think they had Hard Knocks last year in the building, right? So they had all the cameras on them. They were ready to go. And then play 6 of the season, Rodgers is done with the Achilles. Heartbreaking. We talked yesterday about Garrett Wilson and the fact that he was being in Dynasty drafted as the wide receiver 5. He was being drafted as a wide receiver 1 in redraft. We all expected that to happen. He finishes like the wide receiver 30 or something, 32, something ridiculous. But we know that level of talent was still there. Garrett Wilson, again, is being drafted as a wide receiver 1 this year. And I don't think that's going to change by the time we get to August, barring any sort of crazy injury. Garrett Wilson is a wide receiver 1, but there's nobody else there for Rodgers to throw the football to. They drafted Malachi Corley. Sure, he's going to be good for some underneath catches. They have Breece Hall. Sure, but he's not like a pass catching savant. He's not earning 80 targets a season. Right. They have Mike Williams. Great. He's going to stretch the field. But Mike Williams is more of a go up and get it, red zone threat than anything else, especially at this point in his career where he's dealt with all these injuries. So I really think that Tyler Conklin has this ability with what we know about Aaron Rodgers and the fact that he likes to target the tight end with Nathaniel Hackett in town. As terrible as he is, he listens to Aaron Rodgers. It's like his one redeeming quality and does whatever Rodgers wants to do. And what they're going to do is they're going to scheme up looks to, of course, Garrett Wilson, of course, Malachi Corley, of course, Mike Williams, get the backs involved. But I really think Tyler Conklin, at 87 targets, I think that might be a little bit low. I think he might be looking more at like 95 and to approach 100 targets. And then, with his efficiency, his ability to catch the ball, he could get 70 receptions. I think he's going to have more high quality targets from Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be looked for in the end zone. So I really like Tyler Conklin to have the potential to be a back end tight end 1 this season. You can get him for free at the end of your draft. Nobody is thinking about Tyler Conklin, but it really is the Aaron Rodgers effect for me. And the fact that this offense is going to be good and they're going to be around the goal line plenty.
Yeah, Aaron's not pleased with this pick. The one thing I do want to push back on is the Brees Hall. He led all running backs in PFF receiving grade. Like, he was spectacular. He had 90 targets last year. He was like, it was him and Garrett Wilson, nobody else.
Sure.
He also led running backs on yak and yards on screens. Like, the dude's a special talent. So, like, I expect him to be heavily involved in the offense, him and Garrett Wilson. Outside of that, to your point, yeah, like, I think Conklin could be the third guy in that offense. Like, I think that's kind of possible. And with Aaron Rodgers, the offense is going to be more efficient. The like reception target, all that's going to go up. So yeah, theoretically he could get there. I think it really depends on Mike Williams and how healthy he is in that offense. If Mike Williams is healthy, it's kind of going to impress him a little bit just because Mike Williams is a better player. But like, I don't know when Mike Williams is going to be back. Like, there's been no talk about Mike Williams. He's just kind of like, yeah, he's the wide receiver too in the Jets. We've heard next to nothing about how healthy he's going to be, how much he's going to play. So like, Mike Williams terrifies me. Like, I don't want to touch Mike Williams in the draft. Like, I just don't want this guy in any format at all. I'm skipping past him. Like, I don't want to deal with it. So I think Conklin can, like we talked about, like we saw freaking Robert Tonyan beat the tight end 3 because the guy had like a bajillion touchdowns, was running 50%. Like, he wasn't doing anything. And the interesting part was like with the tight end we're talking about here in Conklin, his route percentage went down last year where he's blocking a little bit more because the offensive line was so atrocious. The offensive line could not block. We saw this with Aaron Rodgers and the other guys. So they kept Conklin into more. So he basically ran with the route on 64% of the time. That's going to elevate back to where it's been because he's been in the 70s outside of that for his entire career ever since his rookie season. So if he's going to be between the 70 and 80% route run rate at tight end, that's what we like. And I think Conklin will be better for a bounce back season. So yeah, I think he could very much be the back end tight end one who's like more of a floor play than a ceiling play. But dude, it's viable at that range. If we're talking last round of your picks, like I'm totally fine with it. Yeah, I like it. And like you said, it's Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is anything close to what he's been in the past, like the offense is going to be one of the better ones in the NFL. So yeah, I like Conklin compared to some of the other guys in that range for sure.
Yeah, and he's not competing with anybody. It's Jeremy Ruckert. It's Zach Kuntz. Kenny Yeboah. I mean, Conklin is by far the best all-around tight end there. He's going to be the beneficiary of some of that. And yeah, Brees Hall, of course, that's my bad. I was thinking Jonathan Taylor because we were talking about him the other day about not being the receiving threat that we thought he should be. Brees Hall absolutely is. So you got Garrett Wilson, you got Brees Hall. Tyler Conklin could and should be the number 3 target and potentially the number 2 target. I don't care if Mike Williams is healthy or not. Mike Williams right now, like you said, is not healthy. He has 10 days ago, no timetable for return to practice for Mike Williams. We've heard this story before. I personally don't think guys are injury prone. I'm not touching Mike Davis with a 10-foot pole in fantasy this year. I don't care that he's tied to Aaron Rodgers here. And even if he's out there kind of running the goes and, taking up coverage, great. I think Tyler Conklin is one of these guys who gets elevated by Aaron Rodgers. If he ends the season with 8 to 10 touchdowns, 650 to 700 yards, and, 75 receptions, I don't think we're going to be surprised that Aaron Rodgers was able to, elevate Tyler Conklin here. And I think that's at least has the potential to happen, which is why I'll take the dart throw on him in the final round of my draft.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, actually. Like, that was the case last year because the offense was so atrocious. What Aaron Rodgers does is he opens it up a little bit. Now, interesting, like with Malachi Corley, like he's going to be a guy that's going to be a yak and a screen guy in that offense. So it's going to kind of change how he plays because like we watch him, like I know people like him in our space. The dude's not a good route runner. Like that's not how he was used in college. He still needs to become a route runner. So to your point, Mike Williams has always been the deep threat. He's that X. So if he's healthy and playing, he'll do that. But like, dude, we don't know when he's coming back. So like the 2 guys in the offense are the main 2 that I want. And then if you want to target the tight end after that, totally fine with that. Because like, yeah, he's been kind of that 15% target share guy throughout his career, the last few years, barring injury. He's going to be right in that range again. Like he's one of those guys similar to a Zach Ertz that people don't like, but they play a role because NFL teams value them. So this sucks for our guy Ben Sinnott because Zach Ertz is probably going to play right away, and we're going to be super impatient in week 4. Like this is Tyler Conklin, what he is. So like I think he's fine, and he'll do that for the team. So yeah, I like the call for that.
We're gonna wrap it up, but let's kind of throw out a couple of names that we are looking for in terms of kind of later round flyers. I'll stick with tight end at first, and we both agreed on this before the show. Tyjae Hockenson is going off the board as the tight end 13 at 120th overall, which means you can get him in the 10th round. I have him ranked as my tight end 13, but that's only because I have him slated to miss at least a third, if not half of the season. When he comes back, it's going to be wheels up. I'm not worried about JJ McCarthy from the middle of the season on. I think, as we know, Justin Jefferson helps to open up this offense. We know that Jordan Addison is a very good NFL player. And we know they need a target hog in the middle of the field. KJ Osborne gone. Who do they have? Brandon Powell? Like, no, I don't care about that, right? TJ Hockenson is going to come in immediately and be the number 2 target he should be. And JJ McCarthy has proven to be accurate in his small sample. I think that's who he is. We'll find out. But once Hockenson is back, I think he's tight end, 7, 6,
like
8 the rest of the way.
Yeah, if he's healthy, he's gonna earn targets. Like when we look at these background guys, like once we get past that, it's like I still don't know what the hell we're doing with Cole Kmet. He's top 15. Just why? What are we doing with Cole Kmet? What's his path to anything fantasy viable? Push him down. People stop drafting him. Like he's just he's a roster clogger. I like Freiermuth at tight end 16. Musgrave is fine at tight end 17. Those are the 2 guys in that range. Outside of that, like I'm fine throwing the dart on those guys because there's path to them being good. With Musgrave, it's just injury after injury, so you need him to be healthy. I mean, thankfully for him, not thankfully. His running mate tore his pec, so he's going to be out the entire year. So it's going to be Luke Musgrave in the Green Bay offense if you want to target a good pass catcher in that offense because they have a million guys. Somebody's got to step forward. If he gets step forward, that's fine. We've seen Freiermuth. He dealt with injuries last year, but the year before, he had a really good year. And I am not a Roman Wilson fan. Like, I like George Pickens. It's wide open for targets. So I could see Pat Freiermuth being a top 10 tight end this season if he hits right. I don't know, but I like the talent of him. Those are the other 2 guys for me personally. What about let's try to oh no, go ahead if you're gonna say something.
What's up?
Oh, I was gonna say let's transition to running backs. Like there's a couple other guys. Jonathan Brooks is the default guy for me forever. I was gonna talk about him again on this one, but I'll shift to another guy going in his range. He's going RB30, and my question mark is why? What are we doing? Because when he's up to speed and healthy, which it seems like he's going to be a bell cow in an NFL offense. It's very rare, and his coach Dave Canales absolutely loves pounding the rock. They fixed the interior offensive line. It's gonna be set up for him to handle volume, and volume is the most important thing in fantasy football. On top of that, he's good. That's the other aspect of it. So if you have a good running back stepping into a scheme, they're getting volume. Towards the end of the year, he could be a bona fide RB1 for you. So I'm absolutely smashing Jonathan Brooks in every possible draft potential. Are there any later round running backs or anyone that you're specifically higher on or anyone that you're targeting that you're this ADP doesn't make sense to me? I want them.
There's so many. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is definitely one. He's being talked up by Sean Payton. Again, Sean Payton absolutely loves this guy. One thing we know about Sean Payton is if Sean Payton loves a guy, that guy sees the field. Whether or not he should, right? Taysom Hill, far too many snaps in his career. That's continued without Sean Payton, but that's a Dennis Allen, a Sean Payton disciple right there, just loving on some Taysom Hill. So I love him. His potential to just see looks. Will Samaje Perine even be there when the season begins? He's being rumored as being a cut candidate. And then, of course, you have Javonte. Is he ever going to be back to the Javonte that we were loving a couple of years ago before injury? Who knows? I don't think very highly of Audric Estime at all. I think Jaleel McLaughlin can be the third down back, have situational roles, and carve out a role for himself and potentially take on a bit more. One guy I probably like a bit more than McLaughlin is Rico Dowdle. I think this guy's can be completely slept on. Ezekiel Elliott, we saw that he was able to kind of keep up with Ramondre at his advanced age on the Patriots last season. Now he goes back to Dallas. They have a better situation, certainly a much better passing game than the Patriots ever did. They have a good defense, so they're going to need to run the football, a bit more often. So Rico Dowdle, I think, works in the receiving game. He also works as a runner. And I think Ezekiel Elliott, number one, just isn't going to hold up for a complete season. And number two, if he does, they're going to have to scale back his touches. So Dowdle gets, in a high-powered offense, Dowdle should get a ton of run. And then a third guy I like is Ty Chandler. I just don't trust the aging Aaron Jones to really command a full workhorse load. I think Ty Chandler showed flashes. He tried to, become that bell cow at the end of the season. The difference here is, we don't have Kirk Cousins. checking down to him often. So that offense takes a little bit hit, but we've got a Kevin O'Connell system that Ty Chandler could work through. So none of these guys, I think, are the number ones on their team, but they have the ability to earn touches. And we love a Jalen Warren, who isn't in a great offense. Give me a Rico Dowdle or, Ty Chandler, who's in a much better offensive situation, than Jalen Warren is. And let's see if they can put up similar production at a cheaper cost.
Yeah, I think the Dowdle one's a good call because Elliott's going off the board at RB35. Dowdle is RB49. And I'm like, why is there such a massive difference between these guys?
Yeah.
Like, Dowdle's going below Chandler, which I don't understand the aspect of that. Why? The Dallas offense is going to be better. Dowdle has a path to getting more touches, I think, than Chandler does. Like, we saw Chandler, what he was doing last year. He's a fine player, but he's kind of limited. So I think he could play a solid role in the Vikings offense, which is good. Like, they can split with Jones, kind of what they did in the Packers, like where you mix them back and forth. With Dowdle, I think there's more upside, and he's going later. Like RB49, like, yeah, I'll take that. I also think Gus Edwards is the other guy. Like Gus Edwards or Kamani Vidal in that offense. Gus Edwards is going RB38. Kamani Vidal is not even being drafted. Like, he's just free. So if you want to take a shot on him, it's possible potential. Like, I like all of these guys late. They all have paths to like playing time production. That's what we're looking for. These late round steals where they can be in your lineup towards the end of the year, being good players for you, because open running back rooms, that's what the guys we want to target.
Agree. You have any wide receivers?
Yeah, I did talk about Pop Douglas a little bit. Like, he's super late. I don't know why he's going so late. I expect him to theoretically, from the jump, be the guy. He's wide receiver 66, and it's just like, what are we doing here, folks? He's a good slot wide receiver. He's going to play in the slot. He's going to be on the roll. If you're worried about him not being in 2 wide receiver sets, I get it. But the guy's a good player. And then I also think Josh Palmer at wide receiver 59. I know people love Lab McConkey, but Palmer has the path to being the wide receiver 1 in that offense. I think McConkey has more upside, but if you want the floor play, I think Palmer's the floor play in that offense, and he could get you by the first part of the season. So, like, at wide receiver 59, I'm like, dude, I get it. Like, it's kind of has some stank on his name because Josh Palmer is Josh Palmer, but I think he's a capable NFL wide receiver. And in an offense where Herbert needs someone else besides McConkey, like, maybe QJ steps forward if you believe in QJ. Like, he had the worst potential rookie season I've ever seen, so I'm probably not going to be on QJ. But, like, yeah, Palmer at 59, like, I'll find throw a dart. Who are kind of a couple guys in that range of drafts that you're looking at for wide receiver?
One guy I really love is Rashid Shaheed. I think he's shown it. He's proven it. It's just a matter of Derek Carr can get him the football. They have a better offensive line around him. They drafted Fuaga in the first round. So Carr should have a little bit more time to reach Shaheed down the field. If Dennis Allen can just take Taysom Hill off the damn field for 5-6 extra plays, maybe we can get some production out of New Orleans players. Rashid Shaheed really should be kind of a back-end wide receiver 3 this season if he's utilized properly. And then the other guy is Keon Coleman. He's going wide receiver 50 right now. 50. What are you doing? Like Dalton Kincaid, yes, he should be the 1. Who's the 2? Who's the 2? Is it James Cook? Maybe. Is it, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel? Maybe. Maybe it's Keon Coleman. Maybe Keon Coleman earns 115 targets this season, right? It's possible that he has a path to wide receiver to be the number 1 target on his team and wide receiver 2 value. That's possible. He has a skill set. I'm not a huge believer in Keon Coleman as an elite wide receiver in this class, but I think he is serviceable. And if anybody can kind of move around and help him ad lib, we know they got they had nothing going on in Florida with all the talent they had on the field. They had nothing going on from like a schematic standpoint. If, Keon Coleman can just take some of that, learn to ad lib a little bit more with Josh Allen, I mean, he could find some wide open space in that offense. And, I wouldn't be shocked if he put up a back-end wide receiver 2 season in year 1, just because of the fact that it's a wide open room and a talented quarterback.
Yeah, and he's going right next to Brian Thomas. And that's another, like, these are the rookies you want to target in drafts because there's paths to them being the top guy in their offense. Like, both of those guys have it. So at cost, I love throwing darts on both of those guys. Get one of them on your roster because one of them should pop, and they'll be good viable for you. Like, I get it. Like, we have question marks, but dude, like, it's open. Like, you want the rookies in those offenses this good. So that's a good call.
And then we're going to quarterback, super late. Super duper late. I might take Aiden O'Connell just in case. Everyone assumes Gardner Minshew's the guys there, but we know who Gardner Minshew is. We know what he provides. And I think it's just going to come down to, do the Raiders just want to be this kind of run of the mill, doing what we've always done team, or do we want to see if we have an opportunity to develop Aiden O'Connell into something more? Do I think Aiden O'Connell has that? Not necessarily. But, I think it's interesting to see if, Las Vegas is willing to find out if he's the starter there. I think he has more upside than Minshew, because Minshew really doesn't have upside at this stage. He's serviceable enough. So I'd like to see AOC there. And then I've talked about these guys already. Will Levis, of course. Bryce Young is the other one. He's got that elite upside with his rushing ability, with the fact they built around him. So I like him there to, potentially be a mid-range quarterback too, if he can put it all together. They have a running game now. They have a running back. Bryce Young I prefer. AOC I think is interesting enough where I'd take a dart throw.
Yeah, and like we talked about Geno Smith enough. We'll talk about it again. QB 23, he's 136. Like that's just a value. So just take him. I know like when we get into a little bit beyond that, it gets a little bit dicey with the rookies, but like Bryce Young, I also like JJ McCarthy too. He's like QB 28. If you want to throw a dart on one of those three guys, Will Levis, Bryce Young, or JJ McCarthy, like there's upside for JJ McCarthy, because we saw this guy's super athletic, and I think that's the undersold aspect of him as a player. Like there's athleticism built into who he is. And he could be scrambling a lot in Minnesota Vikings. Like we need to see that offensive line improve. So he could be on the move doing that. So if you want to target him too, yeah, like I like those guys at cost.
How about Bo Nix? Yes or no?
Man, like yes, because he's playing. Yes, because he's an athlete. I don't think he's a good quarterback, but with quarterbacks, it's the hardest position to evaluate. We're consistently wrong. So if you want to take a dart on a rookie starting in an offense, that my issue is more the players around him. I think that offense is just not very good, and that's the whole issue with Bo Nix. But if you believe in Sean Payton and his ability to scheme him open looks, and Bo Nix just get rid of the ball really quick, like yeah, there's upside built into him. Like I'm fine with it. Like I as much as I don't like Bo Nix, like I think there is a path for him to be good and be a back end, or at least like a guy you can stream. You know what I'm saying? Like you pick the right matchup and you play him and you can be good. So yeah, I'm fine with Bo Nix at that cost. What about you?
I'm probably out on Bo Nix. I think for me, it's just the weapons around him. He just doesn't have enough. I do like Troy Franklin as kind of a last round dart throw. We saw the production with him and Nix in college, and he absolutely ate. So if Sean Payton has seen that and can kind of visualize something similar going down as the potential wide receiver one on that team, because Cortland Sutton isn't happy and doesn't have a new contract, he will report. But, he's still Cortland Sutton at this point. Greg Dulcich, we just don't know what he is and who else is on that team. Marvin Mims. I mean, Troy Franklin already has the connection. I'm not going to be surprised, and I've been saying this since they drafted him. The beat report's going to come out in, July during camp, or, beginning of August. They're going to say Troy Franklin is Bo Nix's favorite receiver. Like, no shit. Okay. Because they've been playing together for a couple of years now. So like, of course he's going to be. And then the hype on Troy Franklin will be like, oh, maybe this guy's good. I think he's probably going to be overhyped, but at the same point, if he's not, and he's available as a last round pick, I'll take the shot. And then the other thing I wanted to say at quarterback? Yeah, you mentioned JJ McCarthy. I like the call. What about Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold may not be the guy who relinquishes the role easily. Does history tell us that that's true? No. History is like Sam Darnold is absolutely going to flounder under pressure here. And Justin Jefferson's going to be, banging the table for JJ McCarthy in week 3. But teams keep signing Sam Darnold. They see something. He's still pretty young. I think he's 26 years old. He's been in the league for 14 years. He's 26 years old. Sam Darnold is on his 7th NFL team. It's ridiculous. But there is a world where Sam Darnold keeps this job and puts up, high-end quarterback 2 numbers for you for a majority, if not all of the season. If the Vikings are winning, I think Sam Darnold probably rides that wave. And here's their schedule: the Giants, the 49ers, the Texans, the Packers, the Jets. So they won't be winning. All right. So never mind. Sam Darnold will be out of there by the bye week in week 6. Welcome in JJ McCarthy week 7. Forget everything.
Yeah, like of those guys, I just prefer Drake May. Like I think he's the best option in that range. So that's why I was kind of talking about him earlier. But yeah, like if you want to go any one of those, it's basically pick your flavor of who you like in the situation and talent. If you like the guy Bo Nix, target him. They're so cheap, it's not going to cost you anything is the bigger aspect. So the opportunity cost is you're just going to pick someone else up on the waiver wire if you like them. So if you push quarterback in your drafts and you just take a couple darts on like a few guys, you're basically playing 0 QB in redraft, which is totally viable strategy. Can work. You want to hammer out 2 of those guys, see what happens. You can cycle through them if they don't work out. So this is why we like the late round fantasy football sleepers. Obviously, like the other guy I'll talk about, because I was looking at Bo Nix's ADP and guess who's right next to him? Kamani Vidal. I was like, hey, nice to see you there, my friend. So yeah, like just when you're in this late range, we're targeting guys we think have upside. That's what we're chasing in these picks, because you're going to cycle through them. Week 3, they're not hitting. You just drop them and you go to the next guy, right? So like that's what it's all about with these guys. So
yeah,
we hope these, like we basically talked about a good amount of guys in the show. Yeah, it's my beast shirt, baby. My wife got it for me like 8 years ago, and I was like, all right, we're rocking it again today. I can still fit into it, so that was nice. I was like, yes.
I love it. No,
but yeah, I think I think that's gonna wrap it up for our late round fantasy football sleepers. Tomorrow on Sunday, we're going to be doing a Scott Fishbowl like mock draft. I'm not sure if we're doing something associated with that, but I know we're at least doing a mock draft, and then we're gonna talk about the settings. Just talk about Scott Fishbowl because we're in redraft mode. The scoring settings are out, so we're gonna jump into that. Have a good time with that. So we hope you could join us. I think tomorrow it is. I'm not actually sure. I don't want to say. I was like thinking. I'm like, I don't know the time. So never mind. We're just saying it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. It's happening tomorrow.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Nice little TBD. But with that note, that should wrap it up. So for Jeremy, myself, you can find us on all social media platforms. Thanks for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow.